Last week we tore down one of my favorite engines, the Volkswagen 1.9 liter TDI. This week, another one of my favorites, the Nissan VK56DE. This is an all aluminum 5.6 liter dual overhead cam V8 that you could find in the first generation Nissan Titan, the Nissan Armada, the Infiniti QX56, and for a few years, even in the smaller Pathfinder. Now these engines produce 305 horsepower, but they feel much peppier than that. And the reason I like these engines so much is, well, I own one. We have one in our 2012 Nissan NV2500 cargo van that's done 160,000 miles at this point with nothing but maintenance. Nothing. It does, however, use a little bit of oil, but like any normal person, we check it and keep it full. Now this particular VK56 is out of a 2006 Titan. I would estimate the mileage somewhere around 200,000 miles. I did get a VIN off of it, but it hasn't had any reporting in a long time. The reason it's here is it is a core return. It means somebody bought a good used engine and returned their old one as a core. And let me show you what I found was wrong with it, because I think you'll understand rather quickly what the problem is. You guys see it? Can you see it yet? It had an oopsie. Something has left the crankcase. Where did it go? Nobody knows. Now, I may not be a proctologist, but I think that's the biggest hole we've seen in an engine's bottom. I mean, what am I saying here? That's the biggest inspection port that I think we've ever seen on the channel, and I'm sure it was silent and nobody heard a thing. So anytime I see an engine with a gigantic hole in the oil pan, the first thing I want to do is see if it turns over. So that's what we're going to do. I've reached a stopping point. It's leaking. Okay, it doesn't go past that. Let's go the other way. It's hissing. Oh, see, it's fine. You just got to run the engine backwards. Seriously, why does it go backwards and not forwards? Let's try going forward again. I don't know. Obviously, the next thing we need to do is pull the spark plugs to check for some malice. We don't know what's going on in there. Well, inside this engine was a full set of Autolite Platinums. Not the plug I would have used, but no bent straps, no smashed or deformed plugs. The pistons were happy with the provided factory spec for gap. Maybe the oil pan's just a flesh wound. Let's take a look down these inspection ports. Well, there's a bunch of junk in there. I don't see anything too alarming. I got this engine without an intake, so who knows where it was stored. I see no problems yet. Looks good. The next first thing I'm going to do is pull the right-hand valve cover. It's only got one bolt holding it in. That wasn't even tight. What does it look like in here? Ooh. Now, I've seen a lot more sludge than this, but it's starting to make a little more sense. When you go a long time between oil changes and you use low-quality oil, this is the result. What I am looking for is piles of forbidden glitter. And if you look, there's just a little bit of a silver tinge there. I don't think that's anti-seize. In fact, when you put some light on it, you can definitely see that glow, that glistening metal. Is it bearing? Is it rod? We'll find out. Now for the left-hand valve cover. No. That one's unhappy. Ooh, that one's not good. How am I going to do that? Vice grips! This is going to work. This might work. This isn't working. That didn't work. What can I do here? We're just going to pretend it doesn't exist anyway. Fixed it. So that one is pretty rusty. If the head is good, I can spend some time to get that off, get it hot. The rest of this, look at the silver paste in here. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Now, one thing I did want to show you, this is the inside of the right valve cover. Look at that. Sludge. Let me go find a crack in the road and tar that up. Now it's time to start stripping the front of the engine. We're starting with the belt tensioner. Now we'll get this pipe out of the way. Oh, this has been bent. I have a tool for that. I'll get this upper radiator hose off. Try to do things the right way. Now the water pump pulley. Just a little tap. Will you just... I've got this coolant pipe. Just get these clamps real quick. That's a mess. Next, we've got this coolant manifold and thermostat housing. Just start unbolting. Oh, those bolts are rusty. Did that help me? It's looser-ish. Oh, there's a pipe here. Pull that with the pipe. Like that. Now, the water pump. Look at that, it just falls right off. Let's look at this thing. No signs that it's leaking to the seals or the bearings. Weep hole is dry. There's no rust on the impeller, maybe just a little, but nothing terrible. Bearings feel good. This is a nice water pump. The next thing I'm going to do is remove these upper timing covers. They're like cam gear covers. Oh boy, this thing is just loaded with forbidden glitter. Look at that. So much oil deposits, so much varnish. Looks like the tensioner is pretty extended as well. None of this is shocking. None of it. Now for the other side. Ew, what is this? It's like nobody cleaned their barbecue grill for about 5 years. Well, I have no idea why this had a problem. Boy, that tells a story, doesn't it? We've got bearing matter, sludge, congealed ick. This poor engine. It didn't have to be this way. Now, the crank pulley. Haha. I got a socket for this. Yeah, these weighted sockets, definitely worth their weight. That's not a fun. I think this will just, I thought they slide off. Do they not slide off? Let's see if blue can make it slide off. No. Is it pressed on? It's not pressed on. It could be pressed on. I remember how to do this. Well, I got it so far, and now Now it's angry. I'm growing frustrated. Oh, I think we're almost there. Success. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the oil filter. Oh, come on. I don't know if I'm going to be able to cut this one. It's pretty smushed. I don't think I need to. It's full of sparkles. Now I need to drain the oil. If there's anything in there, I'm just more curious to see what kind of gray matter's in here. Hopefully it's just drained. Yes. Very good. It's rare that nothing comes out, so that makes me happy. In order to remove the timing cover, I need to remove the upper party platter. To remove the upper party platter, I need to remove the damage dish, which is right here. So now we're going to rotate this slightly because I feel like there's a bunch of junk in here, or maybe it's all on the road. We're just going to zip the bolts out of this lower pan and see if we can get that off first. I think that's all of them. Now we need to be very careful. Then this one, I sure did. What's in here? Huh. Just some oil. Oh, no, there's more than oil. There's some fragments. It's not as bad as you'd think. Oh, it's colorful. So it doesn't look too bad. And then you put some light on it. And it doesn't look too good. I don't know what this is. Why did I touch? This is solid paste. That doesn't make any sense. Looks like a piece of impressionist art. There's some larger chunks over here, though. We'll set those aside for later so we can put this back together. Very, very much bad. Now I'm going to break one of my rules. I'm going to turn this engine over. Normally when an engine's blown up like this, I take the pan down so that all the goodies stay in the pan. But in this case, I need to see what I'm doing here. So we're going to rotate it. And if it starts sounding like a cash register, we'll stop. I hear a few loose pieces. Wow, that hole is much bigger than I thought it was. Nope, that's not what she said. Well, let's do a little exploring. It's bad. It's real bad. I don't know how much junk we're going to find loose inside this thing. I feel like with a blowhole like that, most of it ended up on the ground. We're in orbit. Before I go zipping all the bolts that hold the upper oil pan to the block out, I need to remove the oil cooler because conveniently they placed it right over the head of one of the bolts. Oh, that is straight sludge. This poor engine. We'll just get this pulled while we're here. Now, a whole bunch of 12mm headed bolts. Wait, I can't start at the back. Start at the front. It's much cleaner. There are 2 more 10mm at the very back. I think I'm good. This also means that I do not have to fight the dipstick tube, which I don't think that's much of a fight on these. Let's see, this should be pretty easy. They give you places to pry. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's hurt pretty, that's pretty bad. Oh, man. Well, this is just amazing. Look at the size of the hole in that thing. And we've got some goodies in here. A mutilated rod cap bolt. There's a chunk of block or piston. That's piston. I don't see any wrist pins, guys. It doesn't mean they're not here. Oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff up here. We're going to have to take this blowage tray out. All right, let's get this thing out. What? Is that a 7mm on a Nissan? What in the France is this? Well, that broke. That came out. That broke. I don't need to take the last one out. Okay, what's behind this? Wow, that is sharp. Well, there's really not as much as I thought there was going to be. Got a couple chunks. This couple. That was a rod. That was a rod bearing, or multiple rod bearings, perhaps. The coloration indicates it might have gotten slightly warm. There's a rod cap bolt. There's the head of a rod cap bolt. And a couple small shards of metal. And that's all that remains. Lots of bearing foil. You'll have that on these jobs. God, not even a wrist pin. Not a single wrist pin. Back to the carnage. Yikes. So there's where the head of one of those bolts was. Oh, hey, look. I think we still have a wrist pin way up yonder. Not so much in that cylinder. That one's gone. This one is still there. And it looks like its neighbors seem to have fared okay. These two, though, destroyed. Now we're going to roll it back over so we can pull the timing cover. And it dropped the piston ring. Now just a whole bunch of 10mm headed bolts. Can barely tell where the bolts are. Did I miss any? High probability of yes. I think I got them all except for this one. So now we need to carefully pry this off using the cam. Yeah. I think I am missing some in this arena. Let's see if we can scrape some of this gunk out of the way. Look at that. There's a bolt there. Archaeological dig. Now, are there more? Any hiders? Oh, yep, there's another one right there. This seems to be a timing cover access, so maybe that was unnecessary. Let's pry some more. I think we got it, folks. Oh, there. Whoa, there. More sparkles and sludge. Seems to be a theme. Let's get this oil pump off real quick. Is that it? I don't think that's it. Or maybe I just have to pry on it. Oh, I just have to pry on it. Now it's time to take the oil pump apart. No! All right, that one's unhappy. We'll come back to it. Oh, that totally wrecked my bit. Well, that's great. So we're going to avoid the stripped out one and hope we can get the rest of them out. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you strip the Phillips screw out or a Torx, there's a couple different options you can do. In this case, I'm pretty sure this is just a flat plane, so there's nothing, no dowels, there's nothing to keep this from spinning. So since there's only one, we're just going to give it some taps. But you can also take a center punch and try to spin the bolt this way. Once you get it cracked free, they usually spin out with your fingers. So in this case, we can just rotate it. And then comes right out. And that's ugly. I've never seen anti-seize in an oil pump. That has probably some of the worst damage that we've seen in a really long time. Wow, let me get this. Well, I'm going to show you it first and then I'll spray it off. So there's the outer housing. Look at the wear on the inner housing and the overall color of the fluid. I struggle to call this a fluid. That is not what you want to find in here. I'm going to get this sprayed off. We'll see how well it cleans up. Oh no. Now it's just a blow dryer. Look how deep those grooves are. I can't remember the last time we've seen an oil pump torn up this bad. And that happens from either debris running through the oil pump and or not enough oil, so there's no lubrication. And I bet this was a situation of both. Not enough dirty oil. That doesn't sound right. Now the gears have some damage as well. They fared better. They're a much harder metal. But if you look at the texture, let me see if I can get my camera to play nice. If you look at the texture, you definitely tell it's had some stuff run through it. Let's take a look at Timing Town. It all looks pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of varnish on all the parts, and where bearing material can collect, it has collected. But I don't see any missing chunks of timing guide. And so an oil starvation situation can arise if the timing guides fall apart and clog the pickup, which will starve the engine of oil. But I don't see anything missing on these guides. Now I believe these timing tensioners cannot explode when I remove them, so we're just going to unbolt them and hope for the best. See? They knew I was going to be here someday. Now I'm going to crack all of the bolts that hold the rails loose. See here. Now for a higher mileage engine, these look pretty good. They're not coming apart. No missing chunks of anything. Yeah, these are nice. Now we should be able to remove these magnificent chains. Oh, yes. This one, however, this one's a no. That is maybe. No, it looks like I'm going to need to remove the Camshafts. It's unfortunate. At least I got one of these out. Speaking of Camshafts, it's time to crack these loose. Appears to be a little stuck. All right, come on. It just dropped something. I have no idea what it was. Well, there is some junk in here. This looks like RTV. But there's definitely debris in the journal. All the buckets look good, but the journals have a very bad finish. Like they've been ground down. There's definitely a silver hue on everything in here. Another chunk of RTV. The camshafts, they're pretty much wiped. Lots of wear. I bet this is a high mileage engine anyway, and it doesn't look like it was taken care of. Look at the damage to that journal. That's unfortunate. The caps, the finish is all destroyed. There's not really a ton of major grooves, but they're not supposed to look like that. I'll see you later. That's not good. Yeah, this is typical oil starvation situation. And these cams are going in the bin. I think the heads will follow as well. Now it's time to get the head bolts out. Hopefully they don't fight us too much. I think we're loose now. What's behind head number 1? Oh, something's not right. Well, I think it's horrendously apparent and actually a little shocking what you can see here. Don't mind that. That's just the head dropping buckets. Will you finish? Are you done? Good. Let's get this head gasket out of here, if possible. Oh, it was fine anyway. So I am impressed because not only did that piston hit the cylinder head, that piston hit the cylinder head, this one hit the head and did one of these numbers. We know that it's got a couple broken rods in it, but that means that the bearings are damaged in this cylinder, this cylinder, this cylinder. We're at a 75% failure rate, and we're just one head off of this engine. That takes a lot. And you can tell it was running at least when this piston came up because the valves have marks, and the valves would only do that if they protrude from the cylinder head, which means that the engine was turning over at least when this went up. It wasn't like one big bang, like it sucked in water. This is not a hydrolock situation. The pistons get cleaned here, and that is the outline of the combustion chamber when the rod and piston travel too high in the bore because of lack of bearing. That one looks okay. And speaking of bores, let's get the light on these things. So there's definitely going to be some damage here. Obviously, we know the block is junk because bad stuff happened on the inside. But look at the heavy wear, and we can only see halfway down that bore. Obviously, it's time for some science. Let's see what we've got here. That's bad. Worse. Seems to be okay, but I don't trust it. And we've got one that might be okay. So here's the cylinder head. This one was struck by a piston. Not crazy hard, but hard enough to clean the carbon from this part. This one was hit hard. Look how there's nothing here. There's a deformation right here at the tip, and there's clear marks from the valves. I would imagine these valves are going to be bent from striking the piston. I'm sure this was like it just blew up idling in the driveway, warming up in the morning before they go to church. That one was hit, and this is the only one that looks somewhat normal. Now it's time to cram the caps off of this side. Let go. Now I should be able to get this chain off. Ah, yes. Come to me. Well, this side looks just like the other. Maybe a little worse. It's a lot grittier. It's just not good. This is not what you want to see inside one of these things. It's very clear this engine was neglected. I mean, some of these are in work trucks. They get treated like work trucks, and they don't always like it. The cams are definitely pretty chewed up on this side too. I'd wager this side looks a little worse. Cams are trash. Now, when I say trash, I mean, first off, I'm going to recycle them. Second, they might be able to be saved, but the cost to do so vastly outweighs their value. And a Nissan Titan 5.6 is not a super rare engine. We're not dealing with something exotic here. Now for the other side of head bolts. It's behind door number 2. Can I open door number 2? Oh, we're leaking stuff. Leaking? I wonder why this thing's fighting me so much. Oh, I'm making a mess. If I just turn it a little bit this way, maybe it'll be a little bit less bad. Well, what have we got? Well, this side looks better. Let's get this head gasket off. Are you done dropping lifters? Okay then. Head gasket looks good. Now this side doesn't have distinct outlines of the cylinder head. So let's take a look here. There's definitely some pretty heavy wear in the bore. It's pretty deep scratches. That one is, we know we've got another broken rod on this side, so that's not a shocker. And this one seems to be much cleaner than those. That's kind of suspicious. Again, what kind of science would this be without a teardown? Seems okay. And there's a problem there. That seems okay. They rock a little bit in the bores, but only one failed. And the cylinder head doesn't really look too bad. It doesn't look too bad. But I do have something to show you. So one way to tell if you've got a good seal on a valve is to shine a light at the valve. And you can see that there's some light in there. My camera's not really great at this. But you can see, there you go. Now there's no cam in here. And the bucket's surely not holding the valve open. So that valve doesn't seal. The next cylinder doesn't seal. Nothing seals up here, which means that either these are bent, probably. That's not good. Now it's time to turn this thing upside down and start following in this engine's footsteps and knocking rods and pistons out of it. So right off the bat, we're going to start at the front, of course. This one was knocking pretty good. The adjacent rod feels all right, but this one, not good. Well, it looks like we're going to get the first one out, and then we'll have to rotate the crank. Oh, look at the coloration there. Well, that journal is impressive. You can tell that that bearing is no longer a great bearing. It has partially covered the oil supply. It is spun. I'm sure we'll see more of that as we get further along. Let's see if we can knock this rod and piston out. Now we're going to attempt to turn this over get to the next. I'm just going to have to spin that around that way. That's interesting. So watch as I rotate this. You'll see that the bearing, this bearing must be welded to its neighbor because it stays in one spot in line with its neighbor. So yes, damage. Does this not want to let go? Oh, so that's what a bearing is supposed to look like. Just for comparison, bad, good. Although this one is also bad. It's just less bad than that. Let's see, can we get this slap bracelet off of this one? Oh, there's where it's overlapped. So what happens is these things get thin enough that they roll over each other, and they no longer have the tension. I hope I don't cut myself doing this. We can do that when the crank's out. Let's see if we can push the other rod and piston out. All right, we're going to rotate this over to get to the next two. We're going to skip this section. Oh, we went too far. I want to kind of see what this one looks like. You know, we might be able to get this off. It's got a little bit of play there. It just needs bearings. They're only like 15 bucks, like every other Facebook Marketplace listing. All right, no promises here. This is either going to work or it won't. Well, I don't think this is going to work because I can't even get my socket on there. We've played this game before, and I know the answer was vice grips, but I'm still going to struggle a little bit here. I think we might be onto something. I think it's a bolt. Wish me luck. Yeah. Now, will it come apart? That's just because we get the bolt out, that doesn't mean very much. Okay, bolt out. So now what? We just... That doesn't seem to work. I hope I don't damage the crank. Ow, that was a mistake. You know what? I know what we can do. And we'll just have to do it when we get the crank out. All right, now for the next two. That one's loose too. That one feels good. That bearing is absolutely annihilated, and it's a kind of funky shape too. Nope, that one doesn't want to do anything. So this fan-like structure is bearing. It's not supposed to be that way. It's actually built up on its neighbor too, I think. Let's give that a tap-a-roo. Just a little... There we go. Perfect. Let's see if we can get this bearing off without slicing my hand off. Oh, I think this won't come off. Look at that. That's impressive. You couldn't make that if you wanted to. And then there were two. That one's knocking around too. Oh, it's going to be like that. Before we go zipping main cap bolts out, let's get this rear main plate out of the way. Time to zip some bolts out. We're gonna see if we can lift the crank and pull this. This is the thrust bearing. It's a little tighter. This is safe. Oh, we got some bearings free. Okay. It's fine. And now the crank in a second. We still have some work to do. There are still 2 pistons left in the block. Let's see if we can just push those out. Perfect. And finally, yeah, that's fine. There still is work to do. This is probably dangerous. This might not do it. This is not working so well. I don't really want to tear my hand up. Okay, let's resort to plan B. That doesn't seem to be working either. I think it's just a permanent part now. We do have a bearing that we could get off. Maybe. Let's get the tool for that. Oh, I see. This could just float back and forth depending on what side needs it. Slap bracelet. Let's start with the rod bearings. You can't really... So it rolled over on itself. Very discolored. Very deformed. Very bad. Its neighbor, much better. Still terrible. And then we get to this. I am assuming this came from this side. This could have come from over here. Could have been a shared bearing. But that's all that's left. And then this is the most impressive one. I have never seen a bearing do that. But that's awesome. And then they get slightly better. And still terrible. And terrible. And probably the best looking one, which is not good. Let's look at the rods and pistons. Well, here is number 1. Lots of skirt wear. Clearly struck the cylinder head. Look at the heat damage. Same thing next door. Not really any marks from flying shrapnel, but then you get to this, and I'm just going to preface this by saying we did not get a complete engine here. There's still a wrist pin at large. Here is the one where the wrist pin is missing. And I bet if I took the rings off, this might just fall apart. It's pretty terrible. And then this one's pretty impressive also. And by the way, if you guys want to buy any of this stuff, because I don't think any of these parts are good, but if you want desk ornaments, I got a whole gaggle of them here. That is a very, very bad hammer. And then it starts improving a little bit. I'd say this contained the blast pretty well. The problem was that since it destroyed so many bearings, so many of these rods are trash. I mean, I don't think I would use any of the rotating assembly out of this engine. Zero. I think it's all junk. It's all damaged. They do get slightly better, but then again, they don't. They're not really that... The best bearing in this is sometimes the worst bearing in an engine that's been replaced already. That's pretty terrible to say. Oh, and the big end of one of these two rods, and I believe it is number 3. We're gonna visit that on the crankshaft, but let's take a look at this. So that is very heat damaged. What kind of temperature does it take to turn the crankshaft blue? Because that's blue. And this is the unirod. It just sometimes it's for this cylinder, sometimes it's for that cylinder. It's obvious that this damage right here is keeping this together. I could spend a bunch of time grinding this apart. It's just not like, so I can throw them away in pieces. I mean, I suppose if you guys really want that for your desk, I still might not. We'll see. That journal, very discolored, very damaged. All of these journals have damage. Even the mains, because when you get to the main bearings, the front's not so good, and then it gets worse. Look at the deformities on the main bearings. I'm surprised it ran long enough with so many damaged bearings to do this kind of damage. That is very impressive. I think it really was a race to which set of cylinders can blow up first, which locked this engine up. Look at the amount of impact marks. I think this is the side that launched the wrist pin and the small end of a rod out of the pan. And the bores are not that great. They're not as gouged up. Okay, that side looks pretty bad. That's pretty bad. And of course, the bottom's got chunks missing out of it. Just another poorly maintained engine. On the other side, I think this side's a little bit better. Nope, it's worse. Yep, worse. Pretty rough. Just recently, I caught my eye on an article that states if you run your engine low on oil, it frees up some extra horses. And I really think that article is true, because in this case, this person ran the engine low on oil, and all the horses are now free running around in the field, not propelling the vehicle. And coincidentally, when you run your engine low on oil, it gets much better fuel economy because it stops running after it shoots a wrist pin through the upper oil pan. And with all the money you save not having to buy gasoline for your vehicle, you can buy yourself a nice pair of walking shoes. Now, I'm not trying to get all preachy. I'm not trying to tell you guys how to live your lives, but be proactive. When you buy a vehicle that's new to you, whether it's new or used, check your oil all the time till you can establish a trend. It seems to me that 1,000 miles per quart of oil burned is the benchmark for most manufacturers for the acceptable level, which is crazy to me because none of my cars use oil anywhere near that rate. I think the most oil any of my vehicles use is a quart per 3,500 miles. However, manufacturers seem to accept 1,000 miles per quart, and they seem to be kind of edging that line a little further south, which is a really, really scary notion. Now, I do have a theory as to why these particular engines, the VK56s, start to use oil. So our van we bought brand new, and it used no oil for the first 90,000 miles. And then it started just a little puff of oil or a smoke on hot starts. That's all it did, not a ton. Coincidentally, a few months later, it started throwing catalyst inefficiency code. So I'm not sure if the converter came apart because it was burning oil, or if the converter came apart and that caused it to start using oil. I know on some of the Toyotas, like the 1ZZs and the 2ZZs, especially on manual transmission cars, under decel, that converter would come apart and the converter material would go backwards into the engine, score the cylinder walls, and start the oil consumption, which would then clog the converter, overheat the converter, and exacerbate the issue. It's a pretty commonly and well-documented known issue. I'm not sure if that's what plagues the VK56, but they seem to go hand in hand. Every time I get underneath one of those trucks with over 150, 200,000 miles on it, it has aftermarket cats or replacement cats. Ours is probably due for a set as we speak. So if you'd like to buy any of the junk out of this engine, because hardly anything survived, but it might make good desk ornaments, and I still have no idea where some of this engine is, you can go to Importapart.com, or if you want to buy parts off of this Vortec Max 2007 Sierra, which is a pretty rare truck. It's a 6-liter and a 4L70. I don't know where they concocted this stuff up. I'm going to leave our email in the video description. I really hope you enjoyed this teardown as always. I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.